Hello, my loves, and welcome to a very special preseason bonus episode of Seen with Serena Kumara. Now, listen, before we get any further, I'm just going to let you know season 2 does drop next Sunday, May the 3rd. I'm excited. I can't wait. I'll just give you a hint. It is the ease season. I contemplated calling it the easing, but that was just a little too corny, so I decided against it. However, this preseason episode I'm giving to you because it feels really important. I feel like I have had the same conversation so many times, and I'm watching these themes sort of repeat themselves, and I feel like nobody is telling the girls about the Uranus opposition that happens, and I feel like somebody should tell the girls. So I am here to tell the girls. Now, my little disclaimer is that I am not an astrologer, okay? However, I am astrology informed AF. I am a seer, educator, healing experience curator, and I use astrology to support myself and my loved ones, which includes my clients, in creating real ease, rebuilding their self-concept, okay? And this episode is likely to help you do just that. So listen, if you are in your early 40s and you're starting to feel like you want to change something really major, or maybe everything, or things are changing without you doing it, please stay, because we're going to talk all about what the Uranus opposition is, what it feels like, some tips on how to navigate it and to make it as magical as it can really be. And as always, if you are not already, please subscribe, share it with somebody who needs to hear it. So let's just dive right in. You're listening to Seen with Serena Kumara, a podcast all about the journey of coming home to ourselves, the unlearning, the remembering, and the returning to what's always been true about who we are and what we deserve. The Uranus opposition is when the planet Uranus is opposite of where it was when you were born. That planet takes about 84 years to do a full cycle, right? And so when it gets to the halfway point, it would be opposite of where it was when you were born, which is why this Uranus opposition transit happens between the ages of 41 and 44. Uranus is the planet of innovation and liberation and rebellion, disruption of patterns, non-conformity, breaking out of the things that don't fit anymore, and breaking old patterns. Now, as humans, we know that when we're talking about disrupting what doesn't work and changing and things of that nature, that's not usually something that we do when things are really comfortable, right? Sometimes those changes have to be forced either through like internal pressure or external events, okay? And Uranus, as loving as it is, will provide us with both. Now, as I mentioned, Uranus is known for sudden, which could be a sudden external event or disruption that seems to be outside of our control, or an internal realization that pushes us to want to make an external change, right? But the bottom line is that quite often it's very sudden. It feels like it came out of nowhere, which for a lot of us is not our favorite, right? However, the Uranus opposition is about a kind of destabilization that is meant to liberate you. So whereas before it's about building a sustainable foundation, this is about coming into realization about what you built. It's where you feel like I got to break free. Like, yes, I built a structure. Some of the parts of this structure are unsustainable and I got to get out of it. And I can't stay in it any longer. It's going to eat me alive. And I wanted to say that as the grounding force of this transit is that it is here to liberate you. What is happening, what you are feeling, it is here to make you more free. So what it can feel like, and remember, let's hone in on the all of a sudden of it all. It can feel like a rage sometimes, right? It can feel like a restlessness, like a caged feeling, like I just got to break out, right? It can, I've heard it also feel like a despondence, right? Like, I don't really know what to look forward to, if I have anything else to look forward to. Almost like boredom is not strong enough of a word, but like an intense boredom, right? Sometimes it's a feeling of like staleness, like nothing is really wrong. Nothing feels actually broken, but there is no excitement here. I'm not experiencing joy. Contentment is not enough for me anymore, or even disgust. Maybe behavior that you've witnessed or things that you've lived in proximity to all of a sudden like disgust you. And sometimes it could just feel like a completely non-pointed fuck this. Just like, I don't know what this is, but fuck this. Now, I also want you to keep in mind that I have heard this referred to as the authenticity transit, right? And I wanted to point that out because when we talk about all of a sudden, it was fine yesterday, today I just cannot. That can sometimes feel like, okay, what's wrong with me? I need to get that together. I'm having an off day. And that could be true, but it could also be the result of this Uranus opposition. And we got to remember that it's your authentic truth coming up. So it's not that you're feeling this because you're off. You're feeling this because you're on, and you can just see it, right? The best, I guess, way to think of this would be to think of it like a bruise. If you've ever waken up and looked and you got a bruise on your leg somewhere, all of a sudden you don't know where it came from, you don't know what happened, right? Let's assume it happened in your sleep. Just because you were not alert enough to experience the impact of whatever happened to your bruise doesn't mean it happened out of thin air. And so that impact happened, but now you're able to see it. That is the way that I would suggest that you think of the experience that you have during your Uranus opposition. Now, I did forget to mention, this transit lasts about 1.5 to 3 years. So you do have time. It is a journey. It's not like you wake up one day and like everything falls apart and you got to rebuild it in 25 minutes. This is not that. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to be at maximum intensity this entire 3 years, right? Think of it more of like a season, right? It's going to have its peaks. It'll have its ebbs and flows. But yes, it lasts about 1.5 to 3 years. So as I was saying, it is like your seer gets glasses, right? It's like you are able to see what you could not see before, which is a part of where that discomfort is. Oh, this probably has never felt great, but for whatever reason, it hasn't been intense like this. But that doesn't mean it's any less true or there's anything wrong with you. So if you are experiencing your Uranus opposition right now, that means that you're probably born between 82 and 86, right? And so it's interesting because while this can be a really challenging transit for anybody, I think that it's important to kind of name some specific ways where that particular chunk of millennials' experience might be particularly challenging, not more challenging, but a particular, I guess, brand of challenge can come with it, mostly so that you can know what you're up against and also give yourself grace. Now, these are generalizations, which means that, of course, not every single person born during these years is going to have this particular experience, but I kind of want to talk about what unites that generation in case you see yourself in it. So because this is a chunk of millennials that still have some sprinkles of Gen X, it's a little Gen X coded. Many of y'all were raised with a stronger script around, adulthood and responsibility and even religion, stability, and then the ideas of certainty and making the right choice. That part matters. There's a really big focus on essentially building the right kind of foundation and like living on that foundation. Build something that will last, build what makes the most sense, build what's proven. There's a real focus on permanence and kind of like risk aversion. And for a lot of folks, the idea that there is a right way and a wrong way was really strong. For many folks, there was less of a focus on how something felt, right? That didn't hold the weight of, does it make sense? Is this the best thing to do? And I really want to hone in on that last point about how something feels, not really being that valid of a decision maker, especially not compared to the potential result, or is it the right thing to do? Does it make the most sense? Is it going to create stability, right? Because while that is not unique to this, 4-year subset of millennials, I do think it's still notable and something to pay attention to because I think that it was kind of one of the cornerstones. And that's a part of why this sudden upheaval of the Uranus opposition transit can feel like crazy making, because a lot of it is about being unable to sustain a feeling anymore, like feeling like you got to move. Like, I'm so uncomfortable, I've got to go. And if you are coming from a place where your feelings don't make you do anything, right? You don't make decisions from that place, but it's the feeling that's making it like I've got to go. That can really feel like destabilizing, but it's all a part of the way it's supposed to go. And beyond that, because of the focus on permanence, it can feel like, no, I built this thing to last. Okay, I did all the things I was supposed to do, and this is what's supposed to last, and now I'm supposed to be enjoying it. And it's not externally broken, like it still works, but all of a sudden I'm unable to enjoy it. So this is supposed to be the thing. So you mean to tell me because of my feelings it's not going to be the thing anymore? Oh, hell no. Well, remember, it's here to do what? Liberate you, right? Ain't that what we said? Breathe. Because I'm going to tell you why it's magical. It is really magical. And I say that as someone who has seen it from the very beginning. I've been catalytic in a few of them actually, and I've seen and supported from beginning to end, and it is really magical. It can be so beautiful, especially once you really lean into it rather than push against it, okay? The first one is you get to know yourself on a whole other level, a soul level, where all the things you had to do and all you had to be kind of was in the way. Now you can see it, right? Where so we talk about your seer gets LASIK, your glasses are cleaned off. You might reconnect with parts of yourself that you forgot about, things that you used to really enjoy, parts of yourself that hadn't seen the light, that you haven't given yourself the space or felt like you had the space to explore, right? That you forgot about yourself. Even parts of you that you did not know existed, things, gifts that you didn't know you had, and ways to use them. Like this time is really great for that, because the other side of being able to see when something really doesn't fit, like when you can really feel that intensely, you also can feel when something does fit, when it feels like an exhale. The world can also open up through, new opportunities and relationships and partnerships, and even new desires that can be realized, even if it does feel like it contracts at first. That is the part of it, because you're not left to be left with nothing. And honestly, even if it's uncomfortable, clarity is always a gift. And when you build from real clarity and real radical self-honesty, baby, there is nothing to break it down, especially for this chunk of millennials for the 82 to 86 babies. Here's why. Because of the way that y'all know how to build. Now, obviously, this is not every single person, but generally, you guys do know how to build. You know how to put a feeling on the back burner and do what needs to be done. Many of y'all have already built a lot of things. Now, imagine if you take that skill plus your increase leaning on your intuition, if that's something that you may have struggled with before, leaning more on your intuition and following your gut and using the skills that you use to build something. It's spelling fabulous life, just saying. Because y'all already know how to follow through, make things actually real and tangible. That stuff is taken care of. That's why I say it's magical, because you're not learning like basic life skills, right? It's a liberation transit, which means you can still take those skills, but apply it to this liberation. Now, I do want to give you some tips for navigating this beautiful, disruptive, magically uncomfortable sometimes transit. The first one for this and really any major transit is to lean into it now that you know what it is, rather than push against it, right? View it as a journey, an unfolding where you don't necessarily know where it's going to end up. You don't know what every step will look like, and try to get as comfortable with that uncertainty as you can, right? You are who you are. Your experience is your experience. Don't beat yourself up if you're struggling with it, but if you can try, it might make it a little easier, right? Because a part of this is observing how things feel to you, observing your patterns, observing what's happening external to you, and when the time is right, making decisions from that. Now, notice when I said when the time is right. Yes, I've talked a lot about this is an authenticity transit, and what's coming up is what has always been true to you on a soul level, right? That's true. However, I would suggest that there's balance and that we don't turn every thought, every feeling into an action, an immediate action. Like, we're still human. We still have thoughts. We still have rogue thoughts. And sometimes a new awareness is just a new awareness. Sometimes when you notice something, even if it is true, you don't have to decide what to do with it. Like, okay, so I just realized that I hate living here. Okay, great. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you now know where you want to go. And it also doesn't mean that you have to make a flippant decision about what to do with the information that you don't like it here anymore. Sit with that for a little bit. Journal it, write it down, put it in a voice note, and see if that pattern continues, and then see if you get a little more clarity on what to do with it, right? That journaling piece is huge. That's where a lot of clarity comes from. The act of the journaling, but also reading it later. And I've mentioned voice notes or like a video diary, because for some of us, writing is not the thing. The speaking is the thing. This is a great time, okay? A great time to do that. We kind of touched on this, but I want to say it plainly. Make room for experimentation and make that okay. I have a friend who does this at a very high rate. She does this a lot. Every time I look up, she's trying something new and giving herself permission to be a newbie or a novice at something. And it's incredible to see, because what is also happening that I have observed is a personal development, because she is giving herself an opportunity to experiment and explore. Now listen, I'm always going to talk about increasing self-care, because the average person doesn't get enough of it. And if you think I'm just talking about getting more pedicures or massages, no, there are multiple kinds of self-care. There is a perspective of radical self-care that I want you to do a little research and reading around yourself and increase that, but especially during these periods that can feel vulnerable, that can feel like high activity, right? Where like things are kind of changing rapidly, or you're having to be very much in your body, in the moment, navigating. Self-care and holistic self-care is going to be one of your best friends. And that is to include time with yourself, right? However, isolation is not the answer. So another tip I would include is to get the right kind of support. Now, I agree that when you're in more of like a potentially vulnerable space, you do want to be mindful about who you share with and what and all of that nature. But there really is a need for the right kind of community and support. If you have it in your people, your close friendships and loved ones, that's excellent. In terms of other folks to call in, an astrologer, right, might really be up your alley. And I say that because astrologers are good for helping you to understand specific timing and how this might really be impacting you based on your specific natal chart, right? Which can be really helpful. But if you're not as interested in the astrology piece and you're feeling like the bottom line is, I see myself in this and I really want support in how to navigate this, becoming reacquainted with myself, this sort of awakening that's happening, then that's the work I do. My work helps people to get underneath the surface and see themselves more clearly, holistically. I help women to build a more healthy, authentic, truthful, empowered self-concept, because that is what everything else is built from. So baby, we take a look at who you are at your core. We take a look at what needs to be released. Okay. We take a look at what kind of conditioning is getting in the way, and we make a path forward to more authentic, ease-filled living. And there will be a link in the description. And lastly, I think a therapist could be a good resource if it feels like something you need, especially navigating a season full of lots of change and the emotions that come with it. I think that could be a great resource. There are lots of therapists with lots of different specialties, and I have a really large network of like therapists that I know personally. So if you're looking for somebody, you can drop a comment or send me a DM and I might be able to send you somewhere. So in conclusion, my loves, if you are experiencing your Uranus opposition, congratulations. You about to be so free if you let yourself. Give yourself grace. Now that you know what's happening, lean into it rather than push against it, okay? I hope that I have given you something to consider. I've given you some useful information. And if I have, please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, send to a friend who needs a child. So you have your supportive Uranus opposition partner, okay? Don't forget, season 2 officially starts next Sunday, May the 3rd, the Ease season. Please don't forget, turn your notifications on so you are the first one to know when it drops. I love you, and I will see you soon. Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, like, and drop a comment. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, follow the show, leave a review, and share it with someone you love. You can find me on Instagram at Seen with Serena and at serenakumara.com. Until next time, be wildly, radically, and unapologetically good to yourself. Love you.